am a person who is not afraid of failure. And so it's not something I sit in a lot. I did have a number of plans behind me. There's plan A and then plan B all the way down, which is, again, something that Girl Scouts taught me. Like, you always have to have a backup plan, because be prepared is not just something we talk about. It's something we do.
Welcome to Making Maverick Moves, where we dive into the bold decisions and fearless actions of those who refuse to accept the status quo. Today's guest, Vikki Shepp, is the embodiment of a true Maverick leader. As the CEO of Girl Scouts of Orange County, Vikki has spent over a decade shaping the future of youth leadership and championing opportunities for girls to thrive. But what sets Vikki apart is her willingness to take bold risks for the greater good. In the middle of a global pandemic, when many were focused solely on survival, she went to her board of directors with a radical idea: creating Girl Scout troops in homeless shelters. She saw a need, took action, and turned what seemed impossible into a reality. In this episode, Vikki walks us through her process for preparing and executing Maverick Moves, sharing the mindset and strategies that have fueled her success. This is a rare opportunity to hear from someone who doesn't just talk about change, she makes it happen. Let's dive in. Welcome to the show, Vikki.
Well, thank you, Gina, so much for inviting me. I'm excited to be here to chat with you.
Well, good. I wanted to interview you because I remember a Maverick move that you made when I was on the board of directors for the Girl Scouts of Orange County, and it was during the pandemic. I would say the budget was precarious, to say the least. And yet you were able to convince us, your board, with moving forward with an idea that would cost money and not save money. So can you take us back to that board meeting and share why you were so passionate about this idea?
Yes, thank you, Gina. I remember that as well. And your word of precarious is so true. As many nonprofits experienced, the pandemic was a time of upheaval in terms of funding and membership and all kinds of things. But one of the things that we knew to be true before the pandemic, and then actually became even more important during the pandemic, was that there were some girls in our community who were not able to participate in Girl Scouts. And that could have been for a variety of reasons. It could have been that they didn't have a person in their life who had been a Girl Scout, so they didn't know that it was for them. It could have been that they had some financial restrictions happening. It could have been that there were language barriers. And also, in the case of our all-girl initiative, we rolled all of those up and included girls who were experiencing homelessness or housing insecurity. And so at the time, we had taken a look and said, which groups of girls are we going to start this with? Because it's a big set of work to say we're going to go into communities and help them understand why Girl Scouting is important. And this work takes a lot more staff than our traditional service model, which is engaging volunteers to deliver a program, which is why telling the board this was going to cost us money was part of the conversation with the board. Because to deliver Girl Scouting in a staff-led environment, it costs us about 3 times as much as it would in a volunteer-led, because of course we're paying payroll and other things. So this move was important for so many reasons. One, in the pandemic, we know that some of those things that separated girls who are able to thrive with the girls who weren't became even greater. So if a Girl Scout didn't have somebody at home to help them with their school, when they were doing school at home, that became a bigger gap in their ability to be successful. And that was true for Girl Scouts. And so we actually expanded our team at the time when so many nonprofits and even a lot of Girl Scout councils were scaling back their team. We increased this group of folks to serve, and they were able to not go into the schools. Of course, the schools weren't meeting, but what they did during COVID was deliver virtual program. They would drop off kits that had some of the supplies that they might needed. And then our leaders in that area worked with the school districts throughout it and other nonprofits, including the OC Rescue Mission, the Illumination Foundation, so that as soon as we were able to come back in person, we were set up with those relationships. We actually had more outside agencies who wanted to partner with us after the restrictions lifted than we could even manage, which is still the case. Our only limitation is in the number of personnel we have. So this move of saying, let's spend money here, certainly, as you call it, a maverick move. I hadn't really thought about it as being that until you started to mention that, but it was. And the great thing is that we actually launched the All Girl Initiative in 2019. So we had already had a little bit of our, dipped our toe in this space. So it was able to sustain what we were doing with the funding that the board approved. And then it also helped to generate that interest in some donors who said, hey, this is good work. And we know that we've gotten some donations to continue that work because we didn't stop doing it, because we didn't shut down everything. We couldn't meet in person, but we were able to sustain it because the board backed that request, and that was important for us.
What was going through your mind when you decided, you know what, I've got to take this to the board? It's going to seem a little absurd to them, but what was really making you pursue that?
Well, I have to go back. I'm going to say 50 years, maybe more, because my Girl Scout experience, which took place here in Orange County, was really life changing. We talk about the fact that we're not doing brain surgery or rocket science or whatever. And so when we say that Girl Scouts is life changing, sometimes people, they'll cock their head or they'll give a little smirk, but it really, really is. So I think about going back to my childhood, and I joined Girl Scouts in third grade when we moved because my parents got divorced. And so I had been in Campfire before, which was what was in my neighborhood, but then we moved. My parents had gotten divorced. My mom put me in Girl Scouts. And then my mom was getting remarried. And this was a lot, right? For fourth, at that point, I was in fourth grade. And what was the smartest thing that my mom did was I always went to summer camp. And so I was going to Camp Sherman in between my fourth and my fifth grade year, which is when my mom and Bruce were getting married. So my mom called here. It wasn't physically here, but the Girl Scouts of Orange County, and said, we're going to move, which was the other upheaval, was moving. And so when Vikki comes to Camp Sherman this summer, can you put her somewhere near a kid from Seal Beach? And what happened was some smart person who worked for Girl Scouts at the time found a unit where Christy Cabe was going to be in a tent. And they put me in that same tent with Christy Cabe. And we didn't know. When I tell her this story now that we're adults, she just doesn't even remember some of this. But what was great about it was I got there and we were talking about going to school, getting ready to go into fifth grade. And she said, well, where are you going to go to school? And I said, well, I'm going to go to McGaw, but I don't know anything about it. I've been living on Balboa Island, which was magical. Of course, my mom found this little place for us to live, and she was actually sewing bathing suits before she got married on Main Street in Balboa. And I just thought this was the best place in the world to live. And I was very sad to have to move. And so I said to Christy, we're going to this place called Seal Beach. I don't want to move, but my mom got married and I'm going to this place called McGaw, and I've never heard of it. And Christy lit up and she said, I've been at that school since I was a kindergartner. I'm part of this Seal Beach school district. And then we started talking, and her mom, Patricia Cabe, was the Girl Scout troop leader. And I said, oh, well, I just started Girl Scouts last year. I love it. And she said, well, you're going to love it. We have all kinds of things happening. So the day I started in a brand new school with a brand new family, I had stepbrothers, I had all this stuff going on, new teachers, new classmates. I had Girl Scouts starting, so I knew somebody because of Girl Scouts. I had a troop, I had Girl Scout sisters, and I don't know where I would be without that. And so fast forward to the pandemic, and thinking about a girl like myself, different situation maybe, but a girl who is sitting at home and may have that life-changing experience that I had, I didn't want to deny that to any girl. I still don't want to deny that to any girl. I want to make sure that any Girl Scout has the opportunities that I did. And it really was life-changing. It set me up for this life I have now of being the CEO of this organization that I love, but also a lifelong learner, a lifelong community service person, a lifelong hiker, all the things that really helped make who I am. I had this experience. I've seen it with other Girl Scouts and their volunteers in the time that I had spent before I became CEO. So that just fuels me. It's to this day it fuels me, but it definitely fueled me to take that Maverick move.
Before we talk about the success of this program, tell me a little bit about your process when you have these ideas that could possibly appear to be absurd or unconventional or unorthodox. How does it work in your mind? I mean, what would have happened if this would have been a total and complete failure? What were the consequences that you were facing if it didn't work?
Oh, that's there's a lot in that question, right? So first, I'm a very much you would never know, most people would not, but I'm very introverted in my thought process. So I was a swimmer growing up, and I spent a lot of time, a competitive swimmer for 10 years. And so I spent a lot of time in the water, and that was a place where I always incubated, even as a kid. I would incubate my homework. I would incubate my ideas, my art, my whatever I was working on. And so I still use that kind of incubator process. Sometimes I'll say things and people are like, "You just thought of that?" I'm like, "No, I've been thinking about this for 5 years or whatever it is," but I don't have it sometimes come out of my head right away. That's where it starts. A lot of times it'll start with a spark that somebody will say, or I'll start to connect different things. In this case, we had done research. We had a great board member who led us through this research to really look at what the landscape of Orange County is at that time was for young people, especially for girls. And so one of the things that we saw was that there were places where Girl Scouting just wasn't happening. And there were also initiatives that people wanted to fund, because some of this has to come with funding. And this was where that we had already done that research. So I knew that, especially with girls experiencing homelessness, that this was a place where we could make a difference. That was huge. And where there was a need, and then where I also might have been able to have some funding come in to sustain it. And so I had done that incubation process in my head. And then my style is I start to bounce that off people. I vet it with certain people. I have an amazing chief operating officer, Christina Salcido, who sometimes I'll throw an idea out and she just looks at me like, that is the dumbest thing you've ever said. And other times I can see her wheels turning, because for her, as the COO, she has to operationalize it, right? Like, I get to have all the wild ideas. And this was one where when we started talking, and there was that synergy of like, this could happen. And so making sure that from an operational standpoint, my big wild ideas can be operationalized, because we are a nonprofit. We don't have the luxury of doing a lot of testing, where R&D, where a company might have a lot of capital to be able to do that. For us, we have to really think through these things, like, can we operationalize? And so having that partner, we're like right and left hands. As I said, I'll have the big ideas, and then she thinks through that, bouncing it off some of the board members before we took it to the whole board, making sure this was something that was going to ring true, and really going through that, seeing if there were organizations. We had a volunteer start a troop at the OC Rescue Mission. And so we knew because that volunteer had been doing that for years, that there was a way to do this kind of work. We also had a little bit of a proven test, if you would, with that. So all those things kind of incubated, start to talk to people, and then put it together with the budget to be able to present it to the full board, as you heard when we did it. And that's kind of the steps.
In this process, did you ever think that, well, wait a minute, it could possibly fail?
I am a person who is not afraid of failure. And so it's not something I sit in a lot. I probably had that at some point in time in my thought of like, okay, well, if this doesn't work, what do we do? And so maybe I had plans B through Z behind me, or I shouldn't say maybe. I did have a number of plans behind me. There's plan A and then plan B all the way down, which is again something that Girl Scouts taught me of like you always have to have a backup plan because be prepared is not just something we talk about, it's something we do. So I'm not the type of person that fear will hold me back. And so I'm sure there were some moments of like, oh my goodness, what's going to happen if, but I quickly was able to relieve those with, well, if that happens, then this, or if this happens, then this, or we'll shift, we'll do different things. And so it is not usually in my DNA to dwell in that fear place.
So it sounds to me like once you get to a place where you think it's a good idea, it's forward, moving forward.
That is kind of how I live my life. I mean, it's like, I'm going to do this. And again, I think sometimes people look at me like, where did that idea come from? But again, I've usually in those moments, I've thought about something so long that I firmly believe it. And I'm like, I'm going to make this happen. I've just done that in my own personal life, in my education here. I mean, it happened here when I said, I want to be the CEO. What do I need to do to make that happen? And I didn't say that out loud until I had really thought through other things, right? So it wasn't just a whim one day. I'm like, oh, I want to be CEO. It was after a lot of thinking.
So, how did this idea turn into something magical? Can you tell us about some of the success stories that came out of this idea?
Yes. And I have to say, having the right people involved, we had the backing of the board, and that gave us the sense of security of being able to fund it. And then having the right people, we hired our director, Liliana Real, right before the pandemic. And so this was, all happening at the same time. And it could have been like really easy to just say, you know what, we're just going to put this on the shelf and let's come back to it when we're going to be normal, which now we know there's no normal, but we could have done that. But she was also just bought in and worked her network and also learned the Orange County network of folks in this space and just kept having conversations so that when we were ready to be in person, it happened. She was really great at that. I had a conversation with the CEO of Big Brothers Big Sisters, and then those germinate. So we had some of these conversations, and it's really people. The magic is in the people. I believe that, and in the commitment and the passion of folks. And I do think that that's one of my strong characteristics is to get people excited about things. And so, when I start to talk about it and my enthusiasm, I think fuels people. And when they catch that same kind of enthusiasm, it's like those ripple effects. And we had multiple people thinking and introducing us to people and saying, oh, and then what about this? And what about this? And being able to even make it bigger than I could have imagined. The magic happened when we let good people do what they're good at and also stick true to the vision. It could have gone off in a lot of different wrong ways or maybe not aligned ways with the Girl Scout mission, but we kept looking back to how do we really make this a place, Girl Scouts of Orange County, a place where that sense of belonging really happens. Somebody's wearing the uniform with their earned recognition, the badges on the front. And so making sure in this process that when we go into a place where maybe finances is a barrier, that we're also providing them those symbols of belonging that are hand in hand with the programmatic piece, but that symbol of belonging. I want to wear a Girl Scout uniform. I want to fit in with the rest of the Girl Scouts, even if my experience isn't in this traditional mom troop leader way.
When we come back, we'll hear some examples of how this program's changed lives and what it really means to be a Girl Scout.
Looking for a keynote speaker who redefines leadership? Meet Gina L. Osborne. As a U.S. Army Cold War spy catcher and FBI special agent executive, she knows what it takes to lead through chaos, crisis, and change. Her secret? Making Maverick Moves. Bold, fearless strategies that break barriers and shatter limits. If you want your audience to think bigger, lead stronger, and own every room, Gina delivers. Book Gina L. Osborne today and unleash the Maverick mindset at your next event. Visit GinaLosborne.com/Making Maverick Moves.
Vikki, give us some examples of how this program changed lives.
I have to go back to the OC Rescue Mission because what happened there was, as I said, it started off as a volunteer led, and it's still primarily volunteer led with what we say council support. So I get invited to go to their bridging, and that's where a group of girls will go from one level in Girl Scouts to the next level. And for the OC Rescue Mission, that means everything from a little kid becoming a daisy, because we just do an early thing and let them start in April where they start becoming a Girl Scout, and all the way up to an older Girl Scout who might be going from her cadet experience, which is in middle school, to a high school experience and beyond. And so at the OC Rescue Mission's bridging, it's magical. It's also a little chaotic because there's families and there's, the volunteers, and they do a big party and they have the girls lead it, which is exactly what should be happening. So a kid is trying to read a script for the first time. But I love sitting in, and I don't know if you've ever been to the rescue mission, but they have a little auditorium, and I'll be sitting there and just kind of absorbing it all and watching the parents' pride on their face. And these are people who have either lost their home for some reason or are on the road to recovery. They might have had an addiction or financial, or who knows. I don't know all their stories. But they're trying to build their life, and they're sitting in this auditorium watching their daughter do something that maybe they didn't have the opportunity to do. And they are filled with pride. They're taking pictures. They have tears in their eyes. They're thanking me. And I'm like, I didn't do anything. These are the volunteers. They did the magic, but they're so happy to see that. And then to see the girls be excited to go and get their next vest or sash. And to think about, going back to your earlier question, what that feels like as I'll go back to that fifth grade me, and that's a junior Girl Scout for us, what that feels like. And that's just one example. I mean, I have so many, but that's one example.
I love that. I was a brownie. My mom was a Girl Scout leader, so I sort of did both at the same time. But as I told you in our first meeting, I do believe that being a brownie and hanging out with the Girl Scouts and going to Camp Sherman and doing all of those things prepared me for going into basic training, because it wasn't something that I was afraid of. It was something, I've been outdoors, I've lived outdoors, and I have had the opportunity and the blessing, I call it, of being on the board. And I'll never forget one time I went to a board meeting, and one of our Girl Scout board members, because we have board representatives that are in Girl Scouts, she had reserved a place for me because she wanted me to sit next to her so she can invite me to speak at her symposium she was having on robotics. And I was, in charge of cyber and computer and forensics for the FBI. So here this young lady, had the courage to prepare the scenario that would make me say yes to come and speak at her event. And that's just one of many, many, many experiences that I had with the Girl Scouts where the leadership just was coming through. So if you can talk a little bit about how the Girl Scouts makes leaders.
So first, let me tell you, that's Natalie.
Yes.
And I remember her saying to me before you got there, can I put Miss Osborne's name badge next to mine or placard so that I can talk to her? I'm like, you go, you do it. You're so she was so excited about that. So Natalie is now a sophomore at Cal Poly Pomona. She is studying cybersecurity. She talks about you still all the time. and is a great alumni. We actually have an alumni meeting on Monday, and she's one of the ones who's going to be part of my committee. And so, thank you, because you changed her life. That's the important thing, and that is, that's she's a product of being involved in taking those kinds of steps to be a leader, to be that proactive. I think she was 15 at the time. She was young to want to know, first off, to know, what do I need to do to be able to be successful? I believe that was for her Gold Award project, and to just do that. She is a great example, and maybe she wouldn't have been able to do that when she was a daisy. I did not know her as a kinder or first grader, but I do know from her mom how important all the stages and all the developmental levels that take place. So one of the great things and one of the very unique things about Girl Scouts is we go from kindergarten through high school for youth members, right? So we know we're experts in young people. We know that for a daisy, a Girl Scout daisy who's in kinder or first grade, that first step of leadership might just be raising her hand and saying, I want to sing Make New Friends this meeting. Like that's leadership, right? Maybe her friends don't like that song or whatever it is. So from that very first time when the leaders empower those little kids to state what they want, and as women, sometimes we're not really great at that. We're not always saying what we want, and also being okay if it's like we sang Make New Friends last week, what's another song, so that we also teach them that you're not always going to get everything you ask for, but you're not going to get the things you don't ask for, so to be cognizant of what it is that you need. I mean, just think about that from a life skill, not even a leadership skill, how important that is. And then you look at how our national program is intentional about building those leadership pieces in, because unlike other organizations where the program's very prescriptive, you've got to do this and this and this, from being a Girl Scout and being around it, you can open, and now it's not in paper, but it's electronic. You can open up and say, to earn this badge, you have these choices. So you have to take leadership to say, well, I want to do that choice or that choice. And to be able to build that in, that we have opportunities for our members to come to things even outside of their troop. So they have to take that leadership of saying, I'm really interested in building rockets, because we actually do build rockets. We have rocket scientists that we work with, but the rest of the troop's not interested. So think of that, of a person going to an event where they're the only one, and how you have to then take leadership of your own experiences to be able to have a fulfilling Girl Scout experience. So, and then as you said, when you get into high school, our girls can sit with the board of directors, with somebody who's working for the FBI, or someone who's a CEO for an organization here in Orange County, attorneys that we have, our board is phenomenal. And these high school Girl Scouts get to sit there next to these amazing leaders in the community, and they get opportunities like Natalie had with you. We've had Girl Scouts who have gone to different organizations and done internships. We actually had one who, before you were on the board, we had somebody from the Ralph's organization on our board, Donna Giordano. She was a CEO for Ralph's. And we had a Girl Scout who went to do a summer program at her offices. And they had never, how the grocery stores put out pre-Easter things or pre-Passover things, but they had never put out, and I'm going to forget, it was one of the Muslim holidays. They had never put out a display, if you would, of these are the foods and the things that go along with this celebration. And because that Girl Scout, who was Muslim and sat next to Donna, went to that office for a summer internship, now that business had wide open, oh, we've never thought of this. And now it's a daily practice within that organization. So our Girl Scouts have so many different opportunities to practice leadership. and to fail, right? Because they might plan something and nobody shows up, and those are those moments of that didn't work. What do I need to do next time? And that's especially true when a Girl Scout works on her highest award, the Gold Award.
And even just cookies, selling the Girl Scout cookies. People don't realize that that is the opportunity for the girls to learn marketing and sales and all of these other entrepreneurial skills. I had one young lady, she was probably 6, and she had sold probably 20,000 boxes of Girl Scout cookies that one year. If you look at how many people are really good at sales, well, this 6-year-old is really good at sales, being part of that experience. Go up to that booth, talk about, have her explain to you all of the different types of cookies and the programs that they have. You can really change a girl's life that way.
Absolutely. I think that the cookie program is understood and not understood, right? What you're talking about is so true. As I've talked to women leaders in Orange County and beyond, frankly, so many will say, well, I got my start in sales when I sold cookies as a Girl Scout. Or, I learned how to set goals, or I learned how to do teamwork because our troop had to decide what are we going to do with the proceeds, or business ethics. Somebody gave me too much money and I had to say, hey, this is $10 too much. And guess what? That person gave it to me so that I could support the troops with 2 more boxes of cookies or what have you. And so those skills are so baked in, and I use that not even as a pun, but baked into our cookies. And so important to creating these leaders who understand business, and also they're funding their experience. So our cookie program, all the proceeds stay in Orange County. And so by participating, they are making sure that we have a vibrant council. And then they also get proceeds for their troop, and they get to say, here, what do we want to do with this? We have girls going to Europe. We have girls building projects that are supporting folks right here in Orange County. And so doing that cookie program, I hear parents all the time say to me, she learned how to talk to strangers in a way that is appropriate and that has kept her from being too shy because of the Girl Scout cookie program. And, it's another one of those magical moments when you were asking me earlier. I go to booth sales and encourage the girls. And I always talk to the girls. And I love what you said, because sometimes the adults want to get in, but it's like, no, I want to talk to the girls. So I was at a booth, I was talking to the girls, and then a customer came up. So I backed up. So I was standing next to the leader, and this Girl Scout was selling, and the customer, this gentleman, he said, okay, so how much change do I get? And the leader turned to me and said, oh, she's got a learning disability. I'm not sure she's going to be able to do this. And I was like, oh, let's hold on. Let's see. And that kid sat there and she said $18 or whatever it was. And he was impressed. And he said, okay, I'm going to take 3 more because you got that right. And so she got to sell him 3 more. And then he bought so many, he wanted a box. And you know how you do the flip flap on the box so that it stays tight on the top? He wanted her to do that. And so the leader was so worried. And I said, just give her a second. And that kid did it. It took her a while. It wasn't as natural as some being, because it took some dexterity, but the pride in that Girl Scout's face. And the leader is like, I'm so proud of her. She did it all herself. And the cookie program, it really is something that is unique to our organization, and it creates leaders, and it also creates a whole kid, somebody who's got that sense of pride in other things as well.
Vikki, thank you so much for participating in this, and thank you for all you do for our community, because I don't know if you will ever know the impact that you have had on all of these girls based on your great leadership and your humanity and your being there for all of us. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Making Maverick Moves with Gina L. Osborne is produced and edited by Lisa Osborne. Theme music, Maverick Heart, is by retired IRS Criminal Investigative Attaché Clarissa Balmaceda. Connect with us on social media through GinaLOsborne.com/Making Maverick Moves. And don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Making Maverick Moves wherever you get your podcasts.
you.